and I turned on the recording. So hello all, good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you are. We are continuing our series of knowledge management of AI solutions that serve knowledge management. We already saw 2 of them. We are continuing today to see something that's based on data. We many years spoke about the gold rush, the rush after gold. And today, I think that in business terms, there's a rush after data and how to turn the data into gold. And if I take a probe that I remember that 100 years ago, people were suffering because lack of food. And you take it 100 years further from the 20th century to the 21st century, and at least in the Western world, you find that we are still suffering of food, but heart attacks and saccharine problems and being fat, the same thing, but the other way around. And I think that with data, we entered, and information, not only data and information, we entered the same situation. From a place of lack of knowledge, lack of information, lack of data, we have an overflow. And the question is, how do we turn this into gold? And that is what we are trying to ask ourselves today with the assistance of artificial intelligence, and specifically with data tools, that data and information tools. And today we will meet AlyData and Jay Zeidi, but Art, I'm giving you the hosting job. So please, the hosting role. So please, you start and you introduce our guest.
Okay, thank you, Mariah. Yes, this is a very core part of what we're talking about when Annie's presentations at the beginning to introduce us to AI and the intelligent organization. Annie, you emphasized several times the importance of data. But as we know, our organizations have all these data silos. You can have multiple different forms of data talking about the same thing, and you can have the same piece of data talking about different things. So it can get very confusing. So Jay Zeidi, our guest today, has been the chief data officer in the past. He has experience as the chief data officer for the largest financial institution in the world, which is the United States Federal National Mortgage Association. And so believe me, he knows when it comes to large volumes of data and different silos, he certainly knows this firsthand. And his experience there led him to actually start the company that we'll be featuring today, AlyData. So he has a very interesting presentation prepared, which I'll not delay any further. His talk is going to be about, or the angle he's taken is called a GPS system for data. So we're very interested in looking at this. And so with that, let me turn it over to you, Jay. Welcome, and you can share your screen, and we look forward to your presentation. And I will be watching the chat room in the meantime, and put your questions there. And occasionally I may, if it's relevant, I'll pop it up as a question during the presentation. If not, we'll hold off till the end, and we'll go through your questions and get to as many of them as we can. Okay, Jay, take it away.
Thank you very much, Art, and thank you to the audience for attending and for having me here to share my thoughts. Just a slight correction, Art. I reported to the chief data officer, so I wasn't the CDO of Fannie Mae, but just wanted to make that.
Oh, okay, all right.
Slight correction, but appreciate your introduction, and thanks to you and Annie and Moria for inviting me to this. So as Art and Moria mentioned, data is essential, regardless of what you're doing with it, on the back end, whether you're doing AI or BI or reporting or analytics. That's sort of the raw material. And if you don't get data right, all of those things can get impacted pretty significantly. And many organizations are struggling with this challenge right now because, as Art mentioned and Moira, volume of data is growing. The amount of data, the type of data, the rate at which it's coming in. So the question then becomes, how do we deal with this data tsunami? and make sense out of it and be able to utilize this data to generate business outcomes. That's the bottom line, right? How do I create new products? How do I innovate? How do I bring in more money? And how do I reduce the risk for my organization? So this concept of GPS for data assets I came up with because, as we talk with various organizations and clients, the constant theme is, I really don't understand my data ecosystem. I really don't understand how all these pieces fit together. I have no view into all of these silos and all of these fragmented pieces of data and metadata that are sitting around my enterprise. So that's when I came up with this concept of, hey, what we need is a GPS, right? For you to be able to go in and search. You want to find something, you want to get to a destination, go enter it into your GPS and it'll go navigate and show you where everything is at and how to navigate that and provide the context around it. So that's a little bit of the background. Again, not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. You can visit our website, but we primarily do CDO advisory, Chief Data Officer advisory, data and AI governance, and data management. Those are the three areas we specialize in. Been doing this since 2014. Prior to that, 13 years, I was with Fannie Mae, building a lot of very large data systems. 2008, my team built a brand new system to refinance the 50 million homeowners that were underwater, within the United States after the crisis. So that was a great experience. I'm very proud of that, that we were able to help a lot of homeowners in the US. So what is it that we're going to be talking about? There's 4 key contributions that I want to highlight today with you. The first one is organizations are dealing with a lot of complex challenges: digital transformation, governance, risk and compliance, ESG, environmental, social and governance, and corporate social responsibility, CSR, right? These are just some of the acronyms that are thrown around there: GRC, ESG, CSR, et cetera. So the key to solving some of these, in my mind, or at least from my standpoint, is that you have to start with defining what your business value chain is for your organization. And by business value chain, I mean, what are the critical business functions that your organization performs to generate value? So for example, if you're in a manufacturing company that's also sells products, order entry and ordering is a big thing, right? Onboarding customers, MRP and ERP are very, very important because you have to deal with all the logistics and the forecasting and the supply chain, et cetera. So you start with defining what that business value chain is, get input and finalize that. And once you've done that, then the next question is, we have to develop the associated data supply chain, because the business value chain, each of the links of that business value chain is creating data. It's either creating data, it's either ingesting or using data, from upstream systems, et cetera. So the business processes and data go hand in hand. And of course, in between there are your technological components, right? That are needed, right? Applications, whether it's a front end, web UI or some other system. So that's the starting point, right? And many organizations struggle with this because they haven't defined what their business value chain looks like. And hence they struggle, right? And they kind of then go off and work on different silos and kind of get distracted. So anyway, so that's the first the point I would like to make. The second point is, how do I build a flexible ability to capture data and metadata in a standardized manner? I need ontologies and taxonomies that are defined for my specific business domain, my specific industry, et cetera, right? Based on what I do. So that becomes very important. And again, companies struggle at times with this because they look at this as very sort of, technical in nature, right? They don't understand what an ontology is. They don't understand what a taxonomy is, et cetera. So there's some education that needs to happen. So that's the second component. The third component is they have a plethora of tools and they have a plethora of data stores. You could have data quality tools, you have metadata management tools, you have master data management tools, you have data quality tools, et cetera, right? And then on top of that, you have lots and lots of data stores, transactional stores, operational stores, data warehouses, data lakes, data puddles, whatever you want to call them. So that's another challenge, right? So the question then becomes, you have this very fragmented, very siloed sort of ecosystem that you're working with. Very, very challenging to make sense out of it. So what you need is the ability to glue the metadata and this data together, and not just glue it, but be able to visualize this, visualize it in a very dynamic way, and then be able to interrogate this for insights. So that's something that is, it seems simple, but it becomes a little complicated when you start drilling it down into the weeds. But that is an essential capability that organizations need to start building. And this is where sort of all of the knowledge management, all of the other factors come in. So that's the third component. And then finally, how do we do, in most cases, companies are reactive, right? When you're doing risk management, or you're doing compliance, or you're doing operations, et cetera, right? Really don't have timely insights, really don't understand all of the pieces of the puzzle and how things operate, et cetera. So what you need is the ability to have timely, actionable insights that then they can work on, whether it's for figuring out how good their supply chain is, whether it's for figuring out if there are any supply chain hiccups as part of your business or your data, et cetera. So those are the 4 areas that I'm going to be talking about today, and kind of making a case for why you need a GPS for your data assets, or every organization needs a GPS for their data assets. So data is a proxy for operations of a company, regardless of how you slice it. Any organization out there that's in business, data is a proxy. It's either a byproduct, or in some way, form, or fashion is being used to run that business. So in effect, every company is a data company, is what I tell my clients, right? Whether they believe it or not, or whether they appreciate it or not. They're not technology companies. Technology is an enabler. Your cloud is an enabler, right? All of these fancy tools are enablers. But data is the raw material. Data is the strategic asset that can truly create value for the organization, whether it's for creating new products, whether it is for understanding and improving customer experience, whether it's for generating insights on how you can improve your bottom line, et cetera. So very, very important point. Data is a proxy for the operations of a company. So now we tackle, I've sort of shared with you what some of the bigger challenges are. So, but here, wanted to put a framework around it, right? So there are 4 major things that are going on today. Lots and lots of regulations, lots of transformation happening. And then with that, you need to bring in governance, right? You have to have the right processes and tools and accountability, et cetera, across the organization. And then finally, you need optimization, because these systems are getting extremely complex and hard to maintain, as well as expensive. So what you want to do is you want to optimize operations. And there are some examples here in terms of, from a governance standpoint, you're talking about data quality, data privacy, huge business ontologies, AML, KYC, et cetera, right? When you talk about optimization, you want to do operational resiliency, you want to do supply chain management, market data management, et cetera. On the top left, regulation. This is a never-ending stream, right? Tons and tons of regulations coming out, and they're not going to stop. So you have to be mindful, and you have to be proactive about how do you do this in a very thoughtful manner, a strategic manner, so that you don't get into trouble with the law. And then finally, lots of transformation happening. Cloud migration, cloud data management, hybrid environments all over the place. Process modeling, digital transformation, et cetera. So these are some of the challenges that organizations are facing today. And the question then becomes, how do you deal with this, right? How do we tackle this? And there's no simple solution to this problem. So here's where I kind of wanted to summarize, right? There's 3 major things that I see happening. Digital transformation. So according to IDC, by 2022, the total amount spent on digitalization globally would be $2.1 trillion. Huge number, right? And every company out there that wants to be relevant, especially in the COVID age, has to transform digitally. Second big thing happening, alphabet soup of data regulations. HIPAA, GLBA, FCRA, CDPA, CPIRA, GDPR, CFPB, CCPA, you name it, they're there, right? How do we get our arms around this? And you really can't tackle these regulations on a one-off basis. You have to come up with a strategy that allows you to manage the underlying data and govern it and put the right controls around it so that you can comply with all of these regulations. And then finally, your data volumes are growing by an average of 30 to 50% annually. So when you add all of these things up, you start to see the complexity and see some of the challenges that organizations are facing. So what is the reality? The reality is that the lines of business, technology, data, people are siloed. Regardless of how you slice it, this is the reality, which necessitates navigating an invisible landscape of fragmented tribal knowledge, right? This is where we get into the knowledge management piece. The tribal knowledge is fragmented and in most cases has not been captured in a repository of some sort. So that's why it becomes very difficult to discover, understand, and utilize data and ensure that you can do robust governance, risk, and compliance analytics and AI. So this is the reality that organizations are facing today. Very siloed from a people perspective, very siloed from a technology data perspective. Many cases have not captured tribal knowledge in a structured manner that can enable their associates to start discovering, understanding, and utilizing data. And this is why GRC, analytics, and AI become very, very hard in many instances because of these silos and because of the fragmentation and the lack of knowledge capture. So now let me transition into, I've talked about sort of some of the challenges and what's going on in reality. Let's talk about some of the business drivers. When we talk to our customers, here are the things that pop out. Customer experience is huge. All of the companies we're talking to right now are talking about customer experience. Because they're going digital, they're going online, they no longer have the ability to physically interact. In many cases, the physical interaction is going down significantly. They want to make sure the customer experience in the digital platforms across all channels is very, very pleasant. Because if it's not the case, then the customers walk, the customers leave and basically don't come back. So that's a big one. Next is brand value. Again, many of the companies have significant competition happening, and they want to make sure that their brand is valued and their brand is recognized as a trusted brand. And that trust is what's going to drive more customers, that's going to drive more business, that's going to drive more growth. And then finally, growth and transparency. Very, very important. They want to grow. They want to grow their bottom line. They want to grow their top line. And they want to be very transparent. The reason why transparency is becoming very important is because of, ESG, for example, is now forcing a lot of companies to start becoming a lot more transparent in terms of how do they deal with the environment? How do they deal with the social aspects? How are they doing governance? Not just governance at the corporate level, but also how are they governing their data? How are they governing their AI, et cetera? Because investors are looking at those things as non-financial factors as part of the analysis. So you may not be able to get good investors, or your shareholders may not be happy if your ESG numbers aren't very great, right? And if you're not being transparent about that. Also, transparency into the product supply chain. Data and insights becomes very, very important because you have service level agreements to meet, you have product quality to deal with, you have vendor management, you have logistical issues. So again, by building out this GPS for your data, you're not only providing transparency to your associates, you can also use that to provide transparencies to your partners or even to shareholders, because that's what customers are now demanding of clients. And I'll give you 3 examples of recent clients that wanted to build something like this. One was, customer experience. They wanted to build trust with customers and improve customer experience, but they wanted to make sure that the data quality, the product quality is very good and there are no supply chain breakdowns. Because as you know, if a customer doesn't receive their product on time or the quality is bad, they're most likely not going to come back and do business with you. So customer experience and in turn, making sure that your product supply chain and the underlying data supply chain are very robust becomes very, very, very important for them. And they need not just the data, but they also need insights, right? So they can proactively manage that supply chain. If they are going to see any issues, right? If your predictive models are telling you that there may be some issues in your supply chain, you want to be proactive about it and take care of it before it impacts the customer. The customer experience is huge, and that's where your product supply chain and your data supply chain comes in. Second, we have several customers that are asking for this farm to table transparency, right? They want their customers to actually be able to go in. One of our customers wants a their clients to actually go in and scan a QR code on the product and be able to see the entire history of that particular product from the time it was picked on the farm till it reached their table. And as you can imagine, this is a data and information problem, right? It is all about how do I visualize, or how do I capture all of this information, link it together, and be able to show it to the customers in a very, very timely manner. So very important requirement these days. And then better insights. Everybody is looking for better insights, right? They want to understand their supply chain. They want to proactively manage their tasks. They want to make better decisions, etc. So very important capabilities, right, that are needed. And these are the drivers that are pushing companies to start looking outside of the box and looking for solutions. Again, I mentioned ESG and CSR, big areas. So let's now talk about sort of the concept that I presented earlier. You have these, what I call data and metadata puddles, right? So if you look at this little diagram starting at the bottom, you have data privacy, right? And most organizations have one or more products that are managing this. You have policies, you have your, you have to operationalize your privacy. You have to capture all of the metrics. You have to do the reporting, etc. One or more tools there. Customer data platform, master and reference data management. Again, companies are either building CDPs or they already have CDPs in place. They have some sort of mastering process. Again, one or more tools over there, and data and metadata captured. Then you have enterprise architecture tools where they're capturing the technical, business, and data architecture and their flows, right? Again, one or more tools to do that. Then you look at the middle tier. You have data quality and observability becoming a big deal these days, right? Companies want to understand and want to get a good handle on the quality of the data across the entire supply chain. And they also want to understand and observe the data pipelines, right? So that they can proactively manage issues and that impact customers. So that's becoming a huge. So this, you have a lot of data that's being captured in these tools, and you also have metadata around your data quality rules and some of the other factors that are coming in here. Then on the bottom middle to your left, you have your enterprise metadata repositories, right? You have catalogs, you have glossaries, you have data lineage, you have other types of artifacts that are being developed and captured in various products. You have Informatica and Calibra and Elation and a whole bunch of other product vendors out there that are providing this capability, right? So when you start adding, and I've just given you a small subset of the products and tools that are out there. There's a whole bunch of others. So when you start looking at this, I call them data puddles, data and metadata puddles. Question then becomes, yes, I can go in and actually look at my data quality in a silo and get a view in terms of what's happening. I can look at my catalog. I can look at my data privacy, assets, etc. The question becomes, if I'm managing an enterprise, and if I'm trying to get a holistic view of how everything fits together, and I want to proactively manage my environment, I really can't do it, if I'm looking at this in a very siloed and fragmented manner. What I need to be able to glue all of this data and metadata together in what I call a GPS for data assets, and not just glue it, but also visualize it, so that now I have the ability to actually see a dynamic representation of my data and metadata as it's evolving and as it's changing, because my underlying ecosystem is very dynamic, right? And then I also can interrogate this data and metadata for insights. That's the other part. So visualizing it and seeing the dynamic view is one, but I also need to make sense out of it, and I need to be able to use that to make some decisions or to take proactive action, right? So the second component of that is I need to be able to interrogate, and I need to be able to get actionable insights from this GPS. So that's sort of the concept here. And so what's the business value, right? So when I go to clients, the first question they ask, okay, what am I going to get about it? I mean, this seems pretty complex, and it seems like there's a lot of moving parts, and we need to integrate a lot of stuff and bring it together. But the value proposition here is very, very solid. Like I said, there's the regulations, the GRC aspect, there's the ESG aspect, there's the CSR aspect, and then there's running a business aspect, all of the operational aspects, right? So as you're going through and doing transformational projects, you want to understand the current state, and you want to understand what your future state looks like, or build out your future state, right? How do you do that? No easy way today because of this fragmented landscape. Next, you want to do what-if analysis. I have this business process here that I model, and I understand all of the underlying data and technical assets. What happens if I tweak a couple of these processes, right? What is the impact? And should I even do that, right? Or which of these components can I tweak without causing huge interruption to my supply chain? You also want to do impact analysis. If I change this particular data store and make modifications to a particular data store at the schema level, what is the downstream impact that's going to have? There might be a bunch of reports off of it. There might be analytics running. There may be BI running, etc. You also want to enable discovery, collaboration, crowdsourcing, and curation of metadata, right? So these are all of the things that you want to be able to do in a very, very agile manner to run your business, right? These are the use cases that we come across in a lot of cases, right? So again, what I'm trying to highlight here is you have the data puddles. So data puddles have to be kind of glued together so that you can make sense out of it, not just data and metadata. And then you need to build analytics on top of it to generate the insights that the decision makers or the associates need to run your business. So this is so we've partnered with a company called AlyData out of UK. And so we've developed some models, right, for our clients to sort of give them this idea, because of when I present the concept of the data GPS, it looks very complex. But when you start connecting all of the dots and start linking things together and start showing them how this is going to actually come into play, the light bulbs start going off, right? So in this case, what you see is on the right-hand side, my apologies for the blurry image. But the point I want to highlight here is that right off the bat, you see all of the interconnections. You see all of these linkages between the different systems. We're talking about warehouses, we're talking about reporting systems, we're talking about front-end applications. And then on the back end, we're talking about regulatory compliance mandates, et cetera, right? So what this shows you is, number one, the complexity of the interaction. Number two, it also shows you how this data is flowing, right? And all of the different touch points between the various systems that you're, within your enterprise, right? So if you talk on the top, the two red bars that you see on the top basically contain the system that we're talking about. There's a front office capture system. There is a summary system. There is a BO system to do some summarization. There's a reporting system. There's a warehouse. There's some regulatory reporting happening. And then finally, you get into the regulatory technical standards. So the point I want to make here is, again, this is a visual of data that is sitting in multiple puddles, right? And metadata. You have the ability, number one, to visualize it. You also have the ability to drill down, right? So the drill down capability is very important, because you want to start at the 30,000 foot level and give your users the ability to drill down from there down to the level that they are interested in looking at. So for example, if you look at that arrow that says drill down in the middle of the screen, what you see there is you have a reporting system. The reporting system has several data sets that it's working with. There is a regional data set that we've drilled down on. And now you can see all of the underlying, attribute level information for that particular region that you're looking at, right? Something else that's very interesting that is showing you is that little box in yellow right below the arrow says missing PII. So what you're looking at here is not just the data and the metadata itself. You're also now starting to look at, and it's giving you notification in terms of, hey, you have some missing PII. This is a problem, right? You have to tag all of your sensitive data to make sure you're compliant. It also gives you data quality indicators. So if you look on the top, the second arrow from the left shows you that you can color code all of your data quality results. So if you set thresholds, data quality thresholds, this will actually color code this and show you where your data quality problems may lie, right? So rather than you digging through, and trying to find a needle in a haystack, what the system is actually doing is starting to give you the ability to not just visualize your data assets, but also start to give you some very interesting insights into the quality of your data, into the privacy and sensitivity of your data, and where you might be, in trouble, sort of from a regulation standpoint. And it also will start giving you proactive alerts if there is a breakdown in the supply chain that you see here. based on certain rules that you've set or thresholds that you've defined, etc. So again, extremely powerful concept because it gives you the ability to link your business processes to your data, to your technology assets, gives you the ability to visualize and see in real time your quality, which is essential because you want to be able to trust the data that you're using, privacy, which is essential from a compliance standpoint, and any other criteria that you have, that you need for risk compliance, operational management, etc. You can also link this with operational metadata, log data, etc., and be able to proactively interrogate those and get insights as needed. So we did an exercise because again, the other question we get from our clients is, what's the ROI, right? Why should I do this? So we did a back of the envelope calculation with a client that has about 4,000 associates worldwide. And on the left-hand side, you see what I call this an opportunity quadrant, right? So very simple, 50% of the time associates spend on discovering and understanding data. These are all industry numbers, So literally half of the time an associate spends, especially associates that are dealing with data day in and day out, data analysts, business analysts, data scientists, data engineers, etc. Half of the time is trying to find data, understand it, make sense out of it, figure out if they can trust it, figure out where to go to get it, what is the system of record, what is the trusted source, etc. Half of their time. 6% of the operational cost of an enterprise is spent on bad data, is kind of lost due to bad data. Again, huge. When you start looking at these numbers, you start seeing how it impacts the bottom line. 80% data to inside overhead. Taking data and converting it into an insight. People spend about 80% of the time trying to do all of the prep work to prepare that data, and only 20% of the time actually using it to do its valuable, insight generation. And then finally, 80% of that data. Most organizations don't even know about 80% of the data that exists in their enterprise because they haven't cataloged it, they haven't inventoried it. Nobody really knows where it is, right? That's called dark data. So you're literally using, or you have visibility only 20% of the data that you're capturing, right? 80% is not being used for anything valuable. So when you run all of those numbers, and we looked at this particular client with 4,000 associates, about $8 million to $18 million annually in savings, cost savings alone. In addition to this, I'm not talking about, your time to value goes up significantly. Your trust in the output becomes significantly higher. Your employees are much more efficient, and there's less frustration on the part of the employees because they're getting information that they need in a timely manner, etc. Just wanted to put it out there because this is a concrete example of the ROI that can be generated from these types of solutions. So I'm going to close now with the same, back to the four major points I wanted to make in the beginning. Defining the business value chain and associated data supply chain, very, very important. Using ontologies and taxonomies, for your domain, for the particular problem you're trying to solve, critical. Growing the metadata and data puddles, visualizing it and visualizing your dynamic data ecosystem and generating insights from it, absolutely critical for running an organization in this modern, cloud and analytics age. And then finally, you want to be able to get timely, actionable insights from your ecosystem to be able to mitigate risk, reduce your costs, and to be able to be much more nimble when it comes to innovation, operations, customer experience, etc. So with that, I am going to stop and turn it over to Art and Moira and Annie.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay. Yeah, we've got some questions here. I'll go with a question that just popped up right away, and it is from, let's say, Nicholas, I believe. Yes. He actually had two questions.
Okay.
So his first question was regarding the ecosystem visualization slide. He was wondering, I presume you generated that manually, but his question is, hey, is there a way we can, because it was obviously very impactful and very insightful to see how those dots are connected.
Yes.
Is there a way to generate that kind of visualization automatically, he's asking?
Yes, there is. And we actually, and again, I should I should couch my response by saying, if the underlying metadata is available and the data is readily accessible, we can automatically generate a lot of this, right? In some cases, there has to be some manual intervention in the stitching of that metadata, because companies in most cases don't follow naming conventions, standard naming conventions across different systems, et cetera. Or they may not follow standards when they're defining things. So there are certainly ways to automate a lot of the ingestion and a lot of the intake. But then when we start stitching the metadata together, yes, there may be some manual intervention where subject matter experts or the folks that are really intimately familiar with how that data is modeled in that particular system or systems will have to come to the table and help with that. But that in most cases is a one-time exercise, because like many of these critical systems that you're working with, your CRM, your ERP, your warehouses, a bulk of them are not changing. They're not doing massive changes across the board. Yes, they will have some schema changes. They will have some changes on the ground. But that initial round of ingesting the metadata and stitching it, it probably takes care of a lot of that. And then you will have some residual work to do on an ongoing basis just to stitch anything that breaks after the fact.
Okay, yeah. So along those lines, then, regarding number 2, Nicholas asked another question, and I kind of agree with him. Structuring and defining an ontology is a big job, he writes. Based on your experience, are your interlocutors aware of the necessity and difficulty of structuring these ontologies? And I would even add to his question, organizations, you obviously have multiple ontologies going on. How do you wrap your arms around that? And what role do you think knowledge managers can play in organizations with regard to this and other integrative efforts?
That's a great question. I do agree, right? Doing this, developing ontologies and taxonomies can be very challenging. What we've done though is we operate primarily financial services, healthcare, and transportation. Those are kind of the big areas. So you typically know what types of data and what types of challenges these organizations are facing. So we have worked with our solution partner to build the initial set of ontologies and taxonomies, right? That we then go and tweak. Because what we don't want to do is spend a whole bunch of time building out these ontologies and taxonomies, because clients don't have the patience. They don't want to be spending a lot of time and money doing this. So in order to sort of make it more agile and to make it much more efficient, we've kind of identified the patterns and themes that most of these organizations deal with. Like, for example, in financial services, right? You have certain regulations, you have certain assets, you have certain types of data that you're working with all the time. And there's also industry ontologies that have been published, right? There's EDM Council that has done a lot of work on this. There are other organizations. So we typically try and leverage a lot of that work that's already been done and then adjust it and tweak it a little bit based on the needs of the organization, rather than starting from scratch and building these out. So that's how we tackle that problem. In terms of the value that knowledge managers, management professionals can have, it's certainly as this area is expanding, right? As we are kind of companies have started to realize the complexity of the data and why it's important to standardize and organize it and kind of create these taxonomies and ontologies. There is certainly a need for knowledge managers or people with KM background to actually come in and help them with that. It's not just developing it, but it's also educating the senior leaders, educating the associates, training them in terms of why this is important, how to build, how to maintain, how to sustain these things. So I believe there is certainly a role and a very important role for KM practitioners in this space. What I would caution you is that companies that we work with typically don't want to get into the technicalities, right? They don't want to get into all of the nuances around ontologies and taxonomies. What they're looking for is, come in here, look at my problem, give me a solution and solve it, right? So again, that is something that you have to be mindful of, because we work with a lot of KM practitioners, and some of them can get very technical and can get, that tends to kind of turn off some clients, right? So that's just a word of caution.
Okay, excellent. Nicholas, did that answer your questions?
He might be on mute.
Absolutely perfect. Thank you, Jay.
Thanks, Nicholas. Great question.
Okay, let me maybe combine two questions and comments, because they kind of flow from what we're just talking about now. Kaushik sort of has a comment here. He says, while we talk about silos of data, most organizations have a base data of an ERP system, which captures the entire business chain from material receipt all the way to sales. So let me just take his comment and maybe frame a question around it also. Sure. Further elaborate on it further. What are your thoughts of the importance of ERP in everything that you've talked about? If you have, and even legacy systems as a whole, and particularly ERP, if I have an ERP system in place, what are your thoughts as to how that plays in here, and where would that fall short, and what do I need to be looking at maybe beyond, if I'm happy with my ERP system? I think that was where we're getting at here.
Yeah.
What should I be looking at beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, great question. And when we go into clients, right, you have your ERP systems, you have your CRM systems, you have your ERM systems. So, all of these are in some form or fashion, in my mind, data puddles, right? They do create some data, they do manage certain processes, etc., critical processes. But at the end of the day, they're generating a bunch of data, and they have their own sort of I guess intricacies and nuances, right? I used to do Oracle Financial and Supply Chain. And then we have customers that are doing SAP. We have lots of large customers that do SAP globally. Very, very good systems, very, very efficient. I think the challenge you run into is if you start kind of taking a step back and looking at all of these, right? All of these three-letter systems, what you realize is, yes, they're critical for your enterprise. But again, they're also pockets of silos, or they're silos of information. Your ERP system, depending on what you're doing there, if you're doing financials and supply chain, yes, it's going to have a lot of financial supply chain data there. If you have a CRM system, it's going to have a bunch of CRM related data. You have, other systems, ERM systems, you're going to have a bunch of data there. So the point I'm trying to make is that regardless of how you slice it, yes, companies will have these, right? They're dependent on these. But the way we look at it is, these are all sources of data and sources of metadata that we have to ingest and glue together for us to have that sort of holistic view of your systems. And I'll give you an example, right? We have a client that operates in 96 different countries. They've got manufacturing all over the place. Logistics is a challenge for them, right? We were talking to their head of worldwide distribution and logistics and supply chain. And they have SAP, right? They're using it. But the problem they have is, yes, SAP is sitting in the middle of a supply chain, right? It has source systems upstream from it that are providing data, and then it has downstream systems. And what he was saying is, all of that stuff is fragmented, right? They don't understand what the upstream systems do and how that data is generated and how it comes in. They don't understand what's happening downstream. So he's like, yes, I can manage my little world, but then because I don't understand the upstream and downstream, I really have some challenges there, because they have dependencies, right? In doing their logistics and manufacturing and their supply chain, they have dependencies on vendors and partners that are outside of their ecosystem. That information, that data has to get plugged in, right? They have internal systems that are order entry systems, for example, that are bringing in orders that have to be fed through into their ERP. So the point I'm trying to make is, these systems are going to be around. What you need is the ability to glue this data and metadata together to make sense out of this, your data ecosystem, and be able to proactively manage it.
Okay, great. And Lynn Schneider has a good follow-up question to that, or extending this discussion. Her question is, how do you see the business or enterprise architecture as part of this? Most data efforts don't really have that context. And I think, we were talking before the meeting a little bit about, contextualization that an enterprise architecture provides. So what are your thoughts on the role of enterprise architecture in all of this?
I think enterprise architecture is great and it's needed. I think the challenge that most companies face, at least what I've seen, is that they believe that enterprise architecture is all about building pretty pictures and really doesn't sort of generate value, right? That's sort of the, in many cases when we talk to clients, they're like, yeah, we understand, that EA is important because we need a business architecture, we need a data architecture, and we need a technology architecture, et cetera. I think the question is, how do we do this so that it's impactful to the bottom line, right? How do you show value from this? Is very, very important. And that's why I started with this, the business value chain is nothing, it's sort of a component of your business architecture, right? You're defining that level 0, level 1, level 2 processes, that you have in your business architecture, and then connecting that with your underlying data assets, which you can, at the end of the day, can call your data architecture, if you may, right? At a very high level. So these things are extremely important, but how you go about doing it and how you go about influencing the customer to make it happen is very, very important, right? So rather than going in with this, I'm going to build a business architecture for you, or I'm going to build a data architecture for you, what we do is we start with the business outcomes, right? We ask the customer, what is it that you're trying to get out of this, right? What are your business challenges? What are your priorities? And in a lot of cases, they're going to talk about transparency. They're going to talk about ESG. They're going to talk about CSR. They're going to talk about regulations and compliance, et cetera, right? So we start with that and then use that to anchor our conversation and kind of bring the conversation back into, so for you to do ESG, right? Or for you to do risk and compliance at the enterprise level globally, right? Etc. You actually need the ability to do A, B, and C, right? And that could be, you need to build out your business value chain. You have to build out your data supply chain. And you don't have to build all of that in one shot. We can do it opportunistically depending on the specific area that, where they have the biggest challenges. So again, we start with the business outcomes, we start with the challenges, and then work our way in, rather than going in with this solution up front to say, well, I need to build a business architecture for you, and I need to build a data architecture for you, because that sort of, in many cases, doesn't resonate as well with clients.
May I ask, Art,
Yes,
are there any questions further? Can I ask also a question?
Oh yeah, I wanted to ask if Lynn, if Jay answered her question first.
Partially. I mean, I very much have been dealing with this kind of challenge since like 1994 timeframe.
Yeah.
But I think that there's some missing links, and I'd love to chat with you sometime offline about
Absolutely.
the governance structure and how you link all this together. Over.
Yeah, absolutely, Lynn. Please give me drop me a note. We'll be happy to chat with you, because I'm passionate about these areas and really love to work with the practitioners who are.
Me too. Thank you. Your presentation is very valuable. Over.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Okay, Morai. Yes, we have some questions in the queue, but go ahead, please.
Great. So I'm thinking, as Lynn said, she's working on it from 1994. So master data management we always had. And what we're saying is that we have to focus and not do it all. Think agile. Think where we can do it when we're focused on the target. But I want to connect it now to the AI. We're on an AI course. So first of all, I understand that if you connect all the dots, you already have some insights that are valuable for the organization. But I would like to see it as an input to the AI project.
Yep.
And getting some insights from the visualization and from the understanding of the integration of things. So if you can elaborate and give us example or two examples on its usages, 3 or 4 usages or 2, 3 examples on of business value chains that were input for AI, I think it would be valuable for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and let
Thank
me
you.
augment that. Vincent posted a question that ties into your question, Mariah. So let me add Vincent's question. He's saying, at the end of the day, how does your system help each employee to locate the knowledge they need, right? And that's basically what we're doing in knowledge management. Or is your tool mainly for IT and data management people? Or like Mariah saying, if I'm working on a project, how do I find the knowledge that I need in all of this? That's
Yes,
Vincent added
that
to
is a great question. And let me see if I have. So here's a slide that I put in the anticipation of some of the questions. So basically this is, and I'll answer Maria's question as well, but let me tackle the first point. So what is it that your associates need, regardless of which area they're in? Technology, operations, business, doesn't matter. They need all of these things that you see at the bottom, right? They need to be able to visualize the supply chain. They want to be able to find the data that they need to do their jobs. They want to understand the data and the policies around the data. They want to be able to visualize the lineage, right? The provenance. Where did this data come from? Where did it go? What happened to this data? They want to understand the quality of the data, because, can I trust this data or not? So I need to be able to provide them with the appropriate metrics and also some level of certification to say, yep, this data has been certified by a data steward or by the authority or the data owner, and it's good to go, right? And then finally, I need all of these things to do data science and AI better, right? Because I need good data. I need to understand my data. I need to be able to find the data before I can even do anything with it. So those are sort of the underlying capabilities. And then on the top, as you can see, I need data and AI governance, right? So I can do all of these things, but if I don't have the proper governance framework built on top of around this, I'm going to get into some serious problems. And by governance, I mean I need to have the right processes. I need to have a defined set of accountability in terms of who's accountable for these things, right? I want to be able to have ongoing monitoring and somebody taking, being on point to fix these things. So if I run into data quality issues, I know who to go to or who's responsible and making sure that that's fixed. If I get into data privacy issues or I need to understand where private data exists, how I classify that private data and how I should use that private data based on all of the regulations, I need to have accountability there, and I need to have subject matter experts defined as part of my governance model. I also need the ability to have not just stewards for each of the subject areas. I also need management input, because there are certain critical questions that come up on a day-to-day basis where those stewards may not be able to have those answers. They may have to go up to the management. So you have to build this structure, governance structure, to have various levels to take care of that. So going back to the question, what do associates need, regardless of what business, what role they're in? All of these things that I'm talking to you about, right? And then to Maria's point, how does this all tie into AI, right? So again, let me go back a couple of steps. And by the way, in the appendix, I also have this interesting slide that talks about some of the things we're talking about here. Your people, process, the data, technology, and how all this fits together from a governance, from a business architecture, from a governance standpoint. You guys can take a look at it offline. So let me go back to this. Sorry, too far. To this. So all of these things we're doing here, what you see on the right-hand side in this picture is your regulatory reporting, right? So we can switch that out with your AI. So for example, if you're building an AI model to do predictive analytics, for example, what you're seeing, what you can do is you have your AI model as the endpoint, for example, or as the consumer, and then you'll have all of the upstream activities modeled here. So you can pretty much see, number one, visualize all of the data that you're using in your model, right? Number one. Number two, where it came from, where it started, where it came from, what was done to it from a transformation standpoint. Number two, very important, because you want to make sure that your model is built on trusted data and you're training your models on good data, right? And you're training your model on data that is, sort of ethically okay, right? So there's lots of nuances to this when you get into it. So you really need to understand your data. You need to understand what are the policies around the data, right? Can this data be used for doing the kinds of modeling that you want to do? If you build a model that's going to be shared or that's going to impact external parties, you need to understand the data you're using for that model to make sure there's no bias in there, right? So there's lots of things that you need to know about the data itself, right? That this particular model will show you, because you will see where the data came in from, who brought it in, what transformation happened, what are the policies related to the data, etc., before you even get into creating a model. Now, once you build the model, let's assume on this right-hand side, the question then becomes, yes, you validate the model and you say, okay, it's ready to go, right? You push it into production. Now, because you're living in a dynamic, very dynamic environment, your underlying data is changing all the time. Your policies, business policies are changing all the time. So guess what? A model that you put in production a month back may now be out of compliance, or may have some issues because there's some data drift that's happened, right? Your data has changed, or the training data that you used before no longer is valid because you have new policies and you have new things that you have to take into account, etc. So you have to then have a process. That's why we have an AI governance process where you need to make sure that the entire, from the time you develop a the requirements for your model in terms of what is the model going to do, to the design of that model, to the construction of the model, to the testing and deployment, and then post-deployment, that entire process has to be governed, and the right people need to be at the table during that process to make sure that it's being done correctly. There's no ethical issues, there are no regulatory compliance issues that you're going to run into, and there are no serious, other serious issues that you're going to run into, because the folks that are actually developing the models may not have the subject matter expertise, may not understand the data, may not understand the policies around the data, may not understand the regulations related to the data. So that is where AI governance comes in. And that is why this model that we presented over here becomes absolutely critical, because it's the modeling part and the AI part is a important component. But as I mentioned earlier, 80% of the work is happening prior to that. 20% of the effort is happening on the model, but 80% is happening on the left-hand side of that model in terms of bringing it in, integrating it, cleaning it up, preparing it, standardizing it, normalizing it, and then blessing it before it goes into your model. I hope I answer your question, Mara.
Yes, you gave a good theoretical example. Can you give one use case?
Yeah, I can share with you. So we have, I'll give you an example of a financial services company that does forecasting, right? So they bring in a lot of data. They have internal data, lots and lots of internal data, and then they bring in some third-party data. They merge it all together and then to do forecasts to figure out where the market is going, right? Because they issue mortgage-backed securities. So in this instance, what ended up happening is that they had a lot of legacy systems that they were extracting data for doing some of the analysis, and then they had the external system. They really didn't have much control over the data that was coming in from the external parties, because that's how it is. The external party gives you the data, you take it and you do whatever you need to do with it. First of all, make sense out of it, and then integrate it with your internal data, and then build your models, right? So again, one of the challenges they had was that their models were built on data that was old, right? That was like 3-month-old data, because they had survey data. They had, surveys that they had done 3 months back. They were using that to do predictions and forecasting, right? So when we went in there and started creating this visual and started asking them specific questions in terms of not just what data to use, where is it coming from, how old is it, what is the latency around it, what is the quality around it, etc., you started to see some serious issues, right? So we had a conversation with the chief economist and said, hey, these predictions and the forecasts that you're doing are actually invalid by the time they get there, because the underlying data that you have is old. It's like 3-month-old data. You're making projections on 3-month-old data or forecast, right? So that's just an example of the fact that nobody has sat down and looked at it from this perspective, holistically connected all the dots, and then came back to them with a solution. So what we told them is, yes, you need to build this, but in addition to that, you actually have to go in there and change your inputs, because if you're doing forecasts or predictions or predictive models, you really need data that is that supports that particular use case that you're building. So again, lots and lots of reasons why this becomes very important, because customers are used to doing things a certain way for ages, and nobody's actually taken a step back and said, but when you start peeling the onion and start visualizing things, you start seeing, those light bulbs start going on, saying, oh, I didn't realize that this data was going from this to 5 different places, and it was getting transformed in 6 different ways before it got to my data lake, right? That is a problem.
That's great. Let me add, there are 2 more questions, and let me combine them into one question. And I think it ties in perfectly to the flow of this discussion. Those questions have to do with, how do you reconcile competing opinions? Let's say you have the same data set and different taxonomies, people thinking of that same data in the same way. And Nicholas gave a good example, chemists, so you've got all these different domains and disciplines that are involved. They view the world solely in their way. And so how do you inevitably deal with those inevitable differing opinions on what this data is and what it means?
That's a great question. So one of the things that we do as part of the data governance, AI governance model that we propose is identifying subject matter experts by domain and subdomain, right? That's step number 1, very, very important. Because what we want to do is we want to get people that have credibility and that really have domain knowledge and who've been around for a while to be the ones that are kind of driving those conversations. So that's very, very important, right? Then you get into a situation, yes, you have customer data. Everybody in the company is doing something with customer data, and they have different, sort of needs for that. Marketing and sales looks at customer very differently. They look at personas. They look at, folks that are maybe not even customers, they're prospects, right? But then you have sales that's purely looking at customers as, hey, I'm selling something to this person. And it's a very clear demarcation in terms of what customer means to them. And then you have other business units, right? So yes, there is certainly going to be a, sort of, issues when it comes to this. But if you start clearly identifying your data, the data, the main users of the data, and then assigning ownership based on the person who's closest to the data, who understands the data really well, and has some authority within the organization, it makes it a lot easier. Number 1. Number 2, there has to be a model where, like I said earlier, if you have data stewards that are subject matter experts in their area, and they're the ones who are kind of, negotiating and collaborating and partnering to make this happen, in a lot of cases, they may not end up with a solution, right? They may not be able to agree on something, whether it's as simple as a definition of a term or allowable values, etc. So in that case, what we do is we build what we call a sort of a management layer that is the tiebreaker, right? So when you get into a situation where people are not able to agree and you've given them enough time, you basically escalate that and bump it up to the next level. And then management is very good at making decisions, right? You put them on the spot and say, hey, here's the issue, here's what we need, here's what the impact is. And they'll make a decision and they'll push it down. So in some cases, you really have to use a brute force mechanism, because people do get, when you get into the semantics, people get religious about it. And it's really not easy to get, folks to align and kind of to agree. So in those instances, you just push it up the chain, get somebody to make a decision and push it down and then, close that conversation.
Very good. Very good. Well, okay, Jay, I must say that, again, back in the beginning of our course, we mentioned and we all understood that data is a critical part of the intelligent organization and the knowledge-based organization. And we all agreed, nod our heads, that data, yes, is very important. But that was it. Your presentation today has really helped make it real. That's my reaction to this. Thank you so much for making it real. Anybody else have any thoughts before we close and I turn it back over to Mariah?
I have one. Can I make a statement on it?
Yes, Annie.
Thank
please.
you, Jay. Jay and I are both in this field and passionate about this area. One of the things that came out earlier was when Lynn said, this is an education problem, because you constantly hear where people say, you know what, you got to go in and have gloves on when you're dealing with the client, because they want you to just render the solution. So at some point, leadership has to realize that they don't know all. And if you bring somebody in, you cannot buy your institutional knowledge. So therefore, you must understand, or we must have some transition to go from business to technical in order for us to deliver your reality within intelligence and a knowledge era. So I think, thank you, Jay, because I think that brings forth, and also what I had laid out earlier in the 5 levels that you had to go through, which was, instead of doing the current data, information, knowledge, and wisdom, you know, mine was, you have to look at your data, your information, your intelligence, your knowledge, and then your cognition of what you're retaining. So those levels, if they begin to understand, are not technical words, they're actually business words. And we need to get away from lumping things into one, like always calling knowledge management, when we know that this is tangled into a lot of the components that actually help us to have a holistic system. So that's just my 2 cents at the end of this. Thank you very much, Jay. I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me here, and I'd love to have any follow-on conversations for folks that are on this, in this class, because this is a topic that's near and dear to me, and I've been trying to solve this complex puzzle for the last 30 years. And I believe this, we are on the right track with this solution that we're offering to our clients.
Good, Jay. And the comments are all streaming in. They're very thanking you for their excellent presentation. One person says, I will, now that I know this, I'll be speaking to our new data scientists about this. Raising
awesome.
the profile of what you're showing.
I'm glad that it resonated. And I, you know, like I said, I love to share information and whatever little knowledge I have. So I really appreciate you giving me the time and opportunity.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Art. Thank you, Jay. And thank you, everyone. I want to remind us all, we spoke today about data. Next week, we're taking 180 degrees, and we're going to speak about not how to collect the data, how to integrate it, but how to find our experts, how to form smart communities and expertise based on artificial intelligence. So please, we'll be waiting for you for next week. And those who are willing to help us and forming our next year course for the most advanced knowledge management methodologies that we want to learn, not the beginners, that we as experienced want to learn, please help us and go into the survey and choose the most important critical topics that you believe that should be on such a course. Thank you, everyone. Good day, good evening, good morning. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.